Hood President Daniel Musinga begins hearings.
It has been 42 days of uncertainty for President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga since the High Court nullified the duos-led Building Bridges Initiative referendum push.
Daniel Musinga.
And the spotlight heads back to the corridors of justice this week as the appellate court begins hearing appeals challenging the May 16th High Court verdict. Chairing the 7-judge bench will be appellate court president Daniel Musinga. The others being Roslyn Nambuye, Hannah Okwengu, Patrick Kiage, Gatembu Kairu, Fatuma Sichale, and Francis Tuyot. In his appeal, Kenyatta raises, among other grounds, an alleged infringement on his individual rights as a registered voter, following the High Court finding that he, as a sitting president, is barred from sponsoring a constitutional amendment push by popular initiative. Odinga, Attorney General Kihara Kariuki, Electoral Body IEBC, and the BBI Secretariat are among other appellants in the suit. Key among other issues for determination by the court is whether the Secretariat co-chairs Dennis Waweru and Junet Mohammed were bona fide promoters of the BBI referendum push, and whether the involvement of Kenyatta at the onset of the process through this handshake with Odinga invalidates the BBI as a popular initiative on account of Kenyatta being a sitting president. In his submissions to the appellate court, Kihara, through Solicitor General Ken Ogeto, says the recent BBI ruling risks transforming courts into policymakers, usurping the people's freedom to determine what he calls the terms of social contract and how they wish to change those terms, such as through popular initiatives as the BBI referendum push. On its part, IEBC seeks to quash the High Court finding that it lacked quorum to handle the BBI bill, saying a contrary finding on the issue had been entered by another High Court judge. The hearings coming amid intensified political debate for and against resuscitation of the BBI push, seen as critical to the Kenyatta 2022 succession race.
Tunataka BBI ambao mimi najua itasaidia wamama zetu kufanya biashara, hii wameingiza siasa.
The question will be really what is the effect of whatever decision the Court of Appeal will make to the general public. Kenyans as of today know that fundamentally there is a legal problem with the document.
The bench recently allowed Third Way Alliance National Chairman Miruri Waweru to file additional evidence of a report of the Joint National Assembly and Senate Legal Committee on the BBI, with the appellate court on Monday set to hear an application by one Professor Charles Manga, who wants to be enjoined in the appeal as an interested party. Murimi Mwangi, KTN News.
Well, last story by Murimi Mwangi definitely sets the stage as we expect the courts to dispense their duty as of Tuesday, just tomorrow. Allow me to introduce my panelists. Joseph Kyoko is still with us, political analyst. Thanks for your patience. Right now I'm joined by Philip Magal, who's a lawyer, advocate. Thanks for your time. Let me start from this particular point, Magal. I hope you're not enjoined to this case, because the judges mentioned it will not be dispensed in the media,
no,
right?
I'm not a party to the case.
Okay, but there are 17 key issues where the judges actually centered the dispute surrounding the BBI. And talk on town is it's an uphill task changing these 17 issues. Now, from a legal point of view, talk to us. What key issues are set to play out in terms of the 17 issues that were highlighted by the Ngugi-led team?
Indeed, it's an uphill task, and you know, the facts remain constant. Only the legal arguments will change. Okay. The first one is that you know, the doctrine that was propounded by some of the people. Yeah. That is the basic structure doctrine. Does it apply to Kenya? That is number one. Number two is the BBI a constitutional organ that is capable of carrying out, of proposing the constitutional changes that it has. Is it legal? Is it constitutional? And can it do the constitutional change initiative? Number 3 is who can initiate the popular initiative? Is it the president? Is the president allowed to initiate a popular initiative, or is it only private citizens? Number 4 is on the IEBC. Is it properly constituted as it currently is to carry out a referendum? Number 5 is the issue of a legal framework to conduct a referendum. Do we have one? Is one necessary? And if it is, then do we have one? There are many other issues which we'll discuss along as we discuss in the program. Okay. But if you look at all these issues, they are quite complex issues, and they cannot be resolved easily. And furthermore, you know, this is an appeal, and we anticipate that however this process, the appeal turns out, there will be another appeal to the Supreme Court. So the journey is still quite lengthy. The journey is still quite lengthy. So that brings into the question timelines. And I'll ask Kioko, because this is political one way or the other. The timelines might actually hamper a lot of process in terms of the referendum. But what say you about this before we get into the details about these 17 key issues?
I think where the arena in which BBI is currently being canvassed is not what people thought it should be. Now they are caught into a court process, canvassing academic exercise, as Wakili has said here, Wakili Philip has said here. Those issues are very academic. And that's not where it ends. And whatever ruling the Court of Appeal does, somebody will go to the Supreme Court. So this conversation could have been canvassed with the people, so that the people will tell, if you don't like what we are saying, vote no. If you like, vote yes. So they've been taken out of their comfort zone into an area where other actors are running the show, not Raila, not Uhuru. And in reality, the Constitution is alive, the current Constitution is alive, and current constitutional timelines as provided in terms of when the election should be held, in terms of what processes need to be done, in terms of what IEBC has to do. And that is where you see last week when IEB was launching its strategic plan of 2020 to 2024, they were saying come August, certain things must happen. Political parties need to submit certain documentation in terms of membership register. Nomination of political parties must happen by 9th. Resignation of public officers must happen by end of February, or February 9th. So the magic word here is 9th of August, and we all keep moving backwards. IEBC has put us on notice that come August 9th, we have moved into the election calendar period. The Article 89(4) kicks in, that you cannot change constituencies today, 12 months to an election. So if we want to change constituencies, or if we undertake an exercise of constituency change, the earliest we can finalize this is March 2024, because by law, we have 8 to 12 years to play. So new actors, new independent bodies, the judiciary has taken this thing, IEBC is running on its own fall. It is not the arena that the partners in handshake wanted to be right now. So the timelines as provided in the Constitution, the current Constitution, are alive. Nothing stops the institutional bodies from conducting themselves. Even if Treasury wanted to underfund IEBC or to stall whatever IEBC wants to do, then it inherent puts into doubt the election of 2022 or creates a lot of political anxiety in relation to 2022, which is not healthy. So this timing, actually the problem that both Raila or the handshake principles are facing is a question of time.
Okay, Magal, let's get back to you and what the law says about this, because we have the proponents mentioning that there is no law that bars holding a referendum next to the general election. I guess that's what they mention in terms of holding a referendum and a general election within a year. Is there a law that bars this in terms of the timelines? Because they mentioned there's no need of going to an election without solving those cyclic issues that the BBI aims to achieve.
There isn't. In fact, a referendum can be held together with the election. The only issue that they are facing is the 70 constituencies, which, if at all they are to be created and to be on the next ballot, then they have to be done 6 months prior to that election. And that is where the challenge comes in, because we don't anticipate that the referendum will be held and those constituencies created before, in good time for them to be included in the next election. Otherwise, the referendum can be held at any time. But as you can see, the bill as it has been passed in the county assemblies as well as parliament includes the 70 new constituencies. So that, and this is one of the challenges that is before the Court of Appeal. Do we have, under the High Court said that under the basic structure doctrine, yes, we do, as the people, we do have the powers to create more constituencies, but that we do not have the powers to determine how they are located or to do the delimitation. So unless that challenge is overturned, then we still have a problem, and the bill as it is cannot go to a referendum. Or if at all we were to go to a referendum and that particular point of law is upheld, then the bill won't be taken to the referendum as it is right now.
Well, interesting. Let's talk about the president, who is also enjoined in this particular case. And while the 5-judge bench earlier on giving their take on the BBI process, they mentioned that the president being involved through the use of public resources in this particular promotion of the BBI was sort of a red flag. And they also mentioned that perhaps they were questioning whether the president and actually while entering into the handshake deal followed the constitution. So who is Wanjiku, Philip? Does the president fall under this category? How do you look at this?
Me and you are Wanjiku. The man out there on the street is Wanjiku. The lady selling vegetables out there is Wanjiku. The question you pose is the president Wanjiku? He is to some level, but remember, again, he does hold a very special seat, both as the head of state and government, and this gives him immense powers. And the Constitution is quite clear that there are only two ways through which the Constitution can be amended. That is the popular initiative and the parliamentary initiative. There is no presidential initiative, and that is what the court said. I said the president cannot initiate a constitutional change, and in fact it held him to be in contravention of the Constitution and therefore Chapter 6 of the Constitution. It also held that the BBI is a creation of the president, and as such, this initiative is an initiative by the president, and for that reason that it is therefore unconstitutional, which is a big challenge, because again, if you look at the arguments advanced by the pro-BBI side, they basically argued that the government could initiate a popular initiative. They argued that the BBI steering committee as well as the BBI secretariat have the mandate to push the popular initiative. But if you look at it critically, really, you know, these are the organs, these are the people, these are the kind of organs that should be precluded from initiating a constitutional change because of the immense power they wield. Otherwise, indeed, they do have the power to throw the current constitution into the bin. If we allow this, what is to stop the next government from proposing radical changes again to what we may pass in the coming referendum, if at all we do have one. Okay,
interesting. Kyoko, where do you sit on this? Because DP, during that particular interview we touted earlier, he mentioned the BBI poses danger to the rule of law because we are setting a precedent that if you have state power, influence, and money, you can easily change the constitution the way you want. So can the president or a state organ change the constitution through a popular initiative? That will be one of the questions. Talk to us.
It's one of the questions that will be canvassed or is being canvassed by both the parties. Yeah. It is not that the executive has no route to changing the constitution. I think that must be clear. That the only thing they're being told, the executive cannot purport to be the Wanjiku. And there's a reason behind it. That in the previous constitutional amendments that have happened, from 1963 to the last one, or the last one of 1990, the removal of Section 2A, it was pronouncements by the executive. When President Daniel Arap Moi said, Nahi Katiba hi 2A tutoe, the people were not involved. People clapped in that KANU delegates meeting, and it moved on. That is where we are coming from as a country, and we are saying purposefully that the executive cannot be the driver of constitutional change. But the executive has been given an option, go to parliament where you have numbers. So if the executive has to initiate a constitutional change, they have been directed, go to parliament and do. And even if you're doing all these things you're talking about, if one of them touches on certain clauses, the 9 protected clauses, then Wanjiku must be involved. So that do not hide yourself under a popular initiative, yet you are actually an executive initiative. So the High Court judges did not in totality extinguish and say, no, no, you cannot. But they were saying this is the proper channel that you as members of the executive needs to pursue in 256. Now, as shown in 256. So that is the conversation. They have not been shut out. I think when you read the 300-page ruling, they were not only bashing the executive, but they were also offering alternative mechanism that they would have followed in the pursuit of this thing. It will be a mockery of justice when throughout the year, from when the handshake happened to date, pronouncements that have been said by President Uhuru in national address that I foresee a constitutional moment. It has always been about him and Raila Odinga. Therefore, the route they should have used is go to parliament. You have the parliamentary majority. Those things that need to happen that you feel are good for the country should have been pursued in that particular manner. But again, this is a matter that the Court of Appeal will be listening to. They're seized of the matter. They'll know what needs to be done. It will be interesting to see. But again, we go back to the political discourse that this was all about. I do not think this is where President Uhuru wanted to canvass his issues. He wanted to go straight to Wanjiku. Raila Odinga wanted to go straight to Wanjiku, to have a referendum early enough, not 1 or 3 months to the general election, because then the question of the economic cost of this political exercise comes into being. While the law might be silent on whether you can have a referendum 12 months into an election or whatever period, but the economic cost will be, what is the hurry of spending 3 billion now? We have COVID pandemic happening. We have Kenyans who are living under economic strains. Why don't you combine this referendum issue with the general election? But you know, we know what needs to happen. People know that we are creating a 2005 scenario of oranges versus banana and use that momentum to go into the 2022 election. So the referendum needed to happen so that it allows for political juxtaposition, allows for political realignment, and the political momentum created by the referendum leads into the general election. Now that's a political calculation that is there. If you remove that and you say, no, 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 can we disintegrate this document and say, what are these issues which are non-contentious that can be brought forth and dealt with at a parliamentary level thing? Because Parliament is not stopped from discussing constitutional changes unless it touches on the matters defined in 256. Then these other ones that are outside the scope of parliamentary initiative, how can they be enjoined and they become, because we want a better Kenya, part of the general election question, and they pushed there? That should be the logical conversation. That is, I think, the conversation that the 13 legislators, led by Senator of Nairobi, Sakaja Johnson, were trying to initiate so that people can see this document, its content is not bad. There are certain contentious issues. There are certain issues which are not contentious. There are certain issues that can be dealt with at the parliamentary level. There are certain issues that can be dealt with at a referendum. But then the question becomes, when is this referendum? Can the issues that need to be canvassed at the referendum be taken and be part of the general election? Yes, they can. But again, it doesn't add political value to have holding a general election and a referendum at the same time. It doesn't lead into the defined political schemes, what you had earlier called the musical chairs that we must all play into. It doesn't add into that, and that is why it's being resisted.
Well, interesting. Magal, add your take to that and perhaps talk to us about the declaration that was made during that particular ruling on the referendum questions and how it applies, that it must be submitted as separate and a distinct referendum.
If you look at, I do concur with what my colleague here is saying. If you look at how the whole process has been rushed, the fact that even with the COVID pandemic, we still tried to push it through, the way that it was passed through the county assemblies, it speaks more of politics than real concern for Kenyans. If at all these people are concerned with our welfare, I think they would give Kenyans more time, not only to read the document, to digest it, to give their contributions to it, but in the form of the referendum questions that are to be put across, like you say. You see, this bill touches on almost all the aspects of the Constitution. It touches almost all the chapters, yet they want to present it as an omnibus bill to be put to us as a single yes or no answer question. And that is one of the issues that was taken up in the High Court, and the High Court ruled that each item should be voted on. And I do agree with that, because then each and every Kenyan will be able to apply his mind to each and every question and be able to answer either yes or no. Otherwise, this way we would be able to with a single question, we'll be able to hide semi-baked ideas, bad ideas, ideas we don't agree with, and have them passed purely on political considerations, not on proper considerations like whether or not this document is good for us. And I think, you know, the BBI ruling was sobering in so many ways. So many people had taken so many things for granted. And now we are having to step back and ask ourselves, really, do we have a good constitution? Do we need to change it? Do we need to change it so radically? And I think these are the questions that, as much as the president, you know, the president's main argument is that ultimately it's the Kenyan, it's Wanjiku who has to decide. It's not the court, it's not the parliament, it's Wanjiku through a referendum to exercise their sovereign directly, and that the court is interfering, and that no any other organ should interfere with the exercise of this, which is an argument that I do, I'm persuaded by.
Okay.
But Kenyans ought to weigh all these issues and think for themselves, is the BBI ruling good? Does and the political class also needs to weigh whether it should take that ruling into consideration even as it pushes for the referendum.
Yeah, interesting. Kyoko, let's talk about IEBC. Of course, the declaration that was issued that they lack quorum to actually carry the purposes of business related to the proposed referendum, including verification of signatures and all that. What say you about that? Because IEBC is also heading to court with that appeal.
The High Court perspective about it is very interesting, because the quorum of independent constitutional offices provided in the Constitution, that the number is a minimum of 3, a maximum of 9. But then each body is allowed, through an act of parliament, to define what quorum is. So that they move out and they created, the IEBC Act was created, where commissioners were defined to be 7 and quorum was set at a level of 5. Now that's the internal body. And the people who are challenging this are saying the Constitution is above. We are still around the constitutional provided issues. So in terms of quorum, it will be interesting to see. You cannot place the center of that argument. It will be more perceptional than anything. I mean, they've satisfied the threshold as provided for by the Constitution. So an act of parliament that is inconsistent with the Constitution is null and void up to the level of the inconsistency. So at this particular point, it's a very interesting discussion. It's half full, half empty kind of argument. In terms of which was critical, to me, which is critical, is terms of the timelines of verification or the process of verification of signatures. That is where IEBC was caught flat-footed. Because while they have a process of verifying voter registered, and they've set up in their manuals how voter registration or registered voters are verified, by placing the voter registers in polling stations for people to be told, and it has a time frame, I think 3 months or 1 month process. This one of signature verification, IEBC was not able to show how it has gone about to verify the signatures, what mechanism it has put in place to show that this signature is actually Kyoko's signature, or it is Jesse's, or it is Wakilis Philip's signature. They did not prove how they conducted the verification of this signature. I think that's a very interesting argument in terms of matters IEBC. Then the other issue was on terms of the timeframes provided, that voter registration is a continuous exercise, and it is a prerequisite before undertaking a referendum or an election. Right now, IEBC has embarked on voter registration with a specific purpose of dealing with the 2022 election. What mechanism had they put in place in terms of addressing voter registration with regard to the referendum issue? So these are issues. It's just their internal operating mechanism, or that which leads into credibility of an election process, be it a referendum or a general election, of how to go about it. That is where IEBC has been caught in. So it will be interesting to see. It will also be interesting to see when you look at IEBC, when the chairman went to the Senate public participation exercise, or the parliamentary public participation exercise with regard to this BBI document, his presentation was about, and he came out clearly and saying, you telling me to delineate this particular constituency is actually ultra-vires and unconstitutional. His own pronouncement in his presentation, he faulted the BBI Secretariat from going over and above their mandate and issues that will be challenged. Now, when he comes back to court, will he change his position of what he made a presentation to Parliament, or will he now come and play to the political gallery of the day? I think there are certain pronouncements that were made. Look at the Court of Appeal allowing new information to come in of a parliamentary hazard report, which of the deliberations and the final report that was there. And there are comments by members that there are certain parts of this document which are constitutional. Some of the pronouncements, or the people who made those pronouncements, are the people who are supporting BBI. Senior Counsel Orengo, Senior Counsel Otiendo Molo, they'll be quoted verbatim on the floor of the House. These are your arguments. How come at this particular point, so you're coming and negating your argument? So all these things, this will be a very interesting week for all who are lovers of the law, who are practitioners, who are stakeholders on matters law and order in this country, to see what really holds water and what argument carries the day. But again, let me repeat this. This is not the arena that the political actors wanted to canvass their issues. They are being bogged down. They will be bogged down. They'll be caught up with technicalities of there should have been a comma here, chicken and egg, which came first, farmer and teacher, who is better. They'll be caught up in all of that. By the time this process is over, I think there will be, the new actors will have emerged, the need for a negotiated settlement, a negotiated political settlement in the line of the IPPG, Interparliamentary Parties Group, led by churches, to isolate issues. That is the way that we are going to go. I believe so.
That's how you foresee it.
Yeah, that's how I foresee it, so that we do not lose. And I think this is it's good for the country. It will be nice for counties to get 35%. Even if there's a problem today of getting 15%, but the allocation of saying counties to get 35% is a very nice thing.
It is.
The need for MCAs to be members of the county executive, it is a nice proposal that very many people in the counties are having a problem to deny it. The need for members of parliament to be members of the executive, with its inherent contradiction, is something that is popular to many Kenyans. So those that are good and uncontentious need to be. Things like the judicial ombudsman, which in itself is executive overreaching, the contentious one can be packed and be dealt with in another time, in another era that is not there. So people must say the brickmanship of saying Canaan we will go, or DP Ruto saying reggae has stopped because we've prayed and our God has listened to us. It is like those people who want to go to Canaan do not pray. That brickmanship kind of politics needs to end.
Interesting. Magal, add your voice onto this. 70 new constituencies, the IEBC scenario. How do you see this playing out?
IEBC, I don't know what to make of IEBC, you know, especially after the last elections were declared, were nullified due to irregularities. We see with the inefficiency showing up again. Like my colleague has rightly pointed out, it was held that the signature verification exercise was quite wanting. Not only was there a lack of statutory and regulatory mechanism under which it was undertaken, but IEBC was, whatever rules of procedure that they purported to have come up with were illegal. One, because they didn't have public participation, and number two, because they didn't have parliamentary approval. Again, if you look at how the verification exercise was done, signatures were published. 2 days later, people are told to verify whether their signature. I mean, how would you find your signature out of 1.4 million? And after which they declared that the BBI proponents had 1 million signatures to back their popular initiative. Now there is the issue of quorum. Again, now this does not fall solely on the BBI, on the IEBC, but on the president too. I mean, after so many, a big chunk of the commissioners resigned. Why did we have the vacancies stay open for so long? This is something that should have been addressed a long time ago. Now it's a matter of an illegal action coming back and biting the presidency. The IEBC, yes, in one ruling it was ruled that, sometimes back it was held that it was properly constituted to carry out its decision, but that ruling is not binding on a court of similar stature. The BBI court held that it doesn't have the quorum because the IBC Act provides that there should be a minimum of 5 commissioners, and that therefore it's not properly constituted either to carry out the signature verification, number one, or to carry out the referendum. Now the executive has put in motion the exercise of recruiting new commissioners.
Okay.
So these challenges are there, and as you can see, they are not minor challenges. And whatever has happened so far is tainted with illegality, such that even if some of these, some of the holdings by the High Court are overturned, the negative impact is such that it cannot be totally washed away. The only way we can have a proper constitutional amendment process is to start afresh. Either have Wanjiku initiate the process and run with it to the end, or take it to Parliament and petition it such that it's a parliamentary initiative. All the same, what I'm sure of is that it's highly unlikely we will have a referendum before the next elections. And after the elections, I wonder whether the political expediency will still be there to support the proposed changes. So for all intents and purposes, to me, the BBI is as good as dead today as we speak.
Well, let's see how it plays out first of all. But Kyoko, as we finalize, what's your take on the basic structure? Because that was also in contention. What should constitute the basic structure of a constitutional amendment? And if there is a basic structure, what is the implication to the BBI process? Your take?
I think the doctrine of basic structure is an evolving doctrine. There are people who've gone to court prior to argue on basic structure, and they've been dismissed. Part of the bench that upheld the basic structure document has in previous occasion dismissed it as an evolving and unquantifiable concept. But this time they went into depth and say that there are certain things in the Constitution, and given the nature of how our constitutional, how the 2010 Constitution came about, we cannot ignore that the need to overlook the executive, the need to involve people, not only at civic education level, but to create primary constituent structure, primary constituent power, where the conversation starts from below there. And if you look at how Bomas was constituted, Bomas was not an MP's forum. People had been elected from Mashinani coming forward. There were constituency committees that came into provincial committees that sent membership into Bomas so that the churches were represented, the youth were represented, elders were represented. Everybody, any stakeholder who was captured was represented into the conversation at Bomas, and then there were MPs and other leadership. So it was not an MP's forum alone, it was not an executive conversation alone. It was coming from below upwards. That is the culture of constitutional making that we inherited or we fought for the 2010 Constitution. Now, these judges are saying, if we want to attempt to change the Constitution, yes, we respect 255, 256, 257. Yeah. We respect that. But we must not also forget our history, and that is what they cite. And there are certain things, when you want to touch them, it cannot be initiated by the executive. It must come from below. And they cited an example. Even when the CKRC commission was being created at that particular time, President Moi appointed, the late President Moi appointed Professor Yash Palgai. Yet the churches-led initiative had the late Dr. Oki Ombaka. And Yash Palgai refused to lead that commission until the faith-led commissioners came in. Okay. So the conversation about how to start, how to go about it, they're still fresh, and the political actors who are then involved in constitution making in that period, in that fight, the 20-year fight up to getting the new constitution, are alive. Yash Palgai is alive, Professor Kibwana is alive, Dr. William Mutunga is there, Dr. Reverend Njoya is there. People are still there who midwife that political process. And the judges are drawing a parallel and saying there are certain items that constitute the basic structure. For you to discuss them, let it come from Wanjiku expressly, and let us go up to this conversation. Now, that's academic. I can tell you that for free. That's very academic. The Court of Appeal will look at this thing and say you are creating a new law. There's a high probability of saying you guys are creating a new law. You are creating a new concept into the Constitution and making it a fundamental item that must be agreed by all before we start a process of changing the Constitution. Yeah. So this basic structure, again, like I'm saying, it's academic. There are judges who will dismiss it for want of knowledge. There are judges who will agree with it for fronting of new frontiers in terms of jurisprudence and in terms of constitutional making thing. But in reality, it is an academic thing. 255, 256 provide. Maybe they should have just guided the president or the executive on mechanism to follow. But introduction of a new concept called basic structure and defend it over and above is a little bit dicey. I don't think it might be upheld, but again, is nice for them. Maybe Wakili will explain.
Let Wakili add his voice. Okay.
Interesting what you have to say. Indeed, it might be called academic. You know, a reading of the Constitution doesn't have any provision talking of primary constituent power, secondary constituent power, and so on and so forth. But then I think this is something that Kenyans ought to take interest in, and it's something that most of us probably never exercised our minds to. And the arguments by BBI proponents would be that even at Bomas, these are things that we never considered and therefore should not be in the ruling by the High Court. Okay. But then again, you just think about it. If, you know, we have to differentiate two things, amendment and the change of the Constitution. What BBI proposes is to change the Constitution, basically give us a new Constitution. If you look at the Constitutional Amendment Bill, it touches on almost all the key aspects of our Constitution, what the court referred to as the basic structure. Or, yes, the unamendable clauses. And that is therefore, that's why the court argues that, the court found that, you know, to change this, we cannot go through the normal intra-constitutional procedures as set out by Articles 255, 256, 257. Okay. This would be a supra-constitutional process, and they laid out the procedure for carrying out such an extensive change. And that is why they said that that is a power reserved for the primary constituent power. And this would be Kenyans taking themselves through civic education and understanding what they want to do, then going through public participation and engaging one another, and thirdly, coming up with a constituent assembly like the one we had in Bomas, where we nominate some of us to go there and deliberate on our behalf, and lastly a referendum, which is something I do agree with, because if we were to change the constitution as radically as we do propose, then we would be in danger of having a new constitution every 5 years. And there is no procedure provided for it in the Constitution. So therefore, it is important that we are able to distinguish these two and decide which one are we doing. What are we undertaking right now? Is it an amendment, or is it a total overhaul of what it is that we do have? And remember, the court went on to tell us what the basic structure is, it elaborated some of the provisions, like the sovereignty of the people, territorial integrity, independence of the judiciary, land matters, things that Kenyans had grappled with for so long since independence, that coming to the table at Bomas, they decided now this must be in the Constitution, and this is our Constitution.
Okay. Well,
maybe to, like Wakili is saying, and which must be appreciated, I'm saying it's academic, that whatever the feelings of the judges, their aspiration, judges don't write laws. They interpret the existing law. What these judges did is they created a new formula and a new understanding on their own thinking and reflection, and saying there are certain things, if you want to touch them, this must be it. It is their thinking. It is not in law. The Katiba provides clearly the 255, 256, 257. This is how to go about it. So, again, half empty, half full. The Court of Appeal judges, those who may not want to go beyond, they will work, they'll be constrained with the express provisions. Those who want to create new frontiers will be caught up in taking further the conversation of basic structure. But then, can the court, in its own right, create laws? That should be the question that they'll be faced with. If that law does not exist, if we did not capture this process in law properly, we just summarized it in 256, 257 in terms of the popular initiative, how then do you want to say the popular initiative has to have this character and this character? So it's going to be very interesting. It's just it's just interpretational issues. And for me, I have a strong feeling that majority of the judges at the Court of Appeal might not want to push it to the limit, to the new frontier that the High Court judges felt was required. They will restrict them with the daily issues that they can find fault with. But a new concept, a new thinking might be too hard for them to comprehend.
Well, that'll be interesting. Let's see how it plays out. Magal, as we conclude, talk to us about the Independent Health Commission, because that might have been an issue as well. Was it unlawful for the constitutional amendment bill to leave the Independent Health Commission out of the bill? Well, what's your take on that?
I think even the High Court held that it wasn't illegal or unconstitutional for it to be left out. For the simple reason, that these were views that were presented by the nurses to the commission, to the BBI. They were considered, but they were eventually not included. These people still have an alternative route. Should they feel strongly that they need to have it included, they can front their Wanjikus. They can initiate a popular initiative and have it. But as the BBI proponents of the view that this is a matter that can be handled in a statute or at an administrative level. So therefore, for me, that is not really, that's neither here nor there. It's not really a strong point. Of course, we know that there are serious issues that afflict health, the health sector since it was devolved. It would have been good to have the affairs of the nurses and doctors centrally catered for, just like it has been done for the teachers. But then, it's not an urgent item, or it's not necessary that it should be there in the proposals made by the BBI.
Okay. What of the county assemblies or parliament altering the existing bill sent to them? Where do you sit on this?
On popular initiative, the court held, and I think rightly so, that they don't have the power to alter. Some people are arguing that consideration and approval should be interpreted to mean the power to improve or alter. But the court was of a contrary opinion. And I do agree. The county assemblies and parliament do have their own avenue of making constitutional change. And it is only in such circumstances that they can then alter their bills. But when it has been initiated by Wanjiku, and it's the basis upon which signatures have been collected, and it's been coalesced into an idea which is then placed before the Assembly or the National Assembly or the county assemblies, it would be a misnomer for them then to open it up, because that would mean then that you have to send it back to square one to restart the process and then push it. Because what if Wanjiku tables before Parliament is not what leaves Parliament? It would have been hijacked, and at the end of the day, it would be more of a parliamentary initiative than a popular one.
Okay, interesting. Kyoko, as we finalize, perhaps speak to the legal backing, that particular question, to initiate a popular initiative. It was interrogated. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, if I can go slightly back to the MCAs and the county assemblies changing laws, and the basic principle is simple, that if you, the leadership, thought these things were weighty enough, you would have used your positions to initiate change. But because you ignored them and you ignored these issues, it went to the people, Wanjikus, and the ordinary people organized themselves in that conversation, collected signatures, and brought it up. So when it is coming to you as a county, you have no role, because you ignored the people, and the masses have spoken and therefore have engaged themselves and have expressed themselves. So you cannot alter, you cannot change even a comma in this wording and in this documentation. That was the feeling. I think that's the spirit in which the popular initiative is based on. That one, the executive or the leadership in the country can be selfish. The leadership in the country might not want to take certain issues because of being held hostage by other interests. So people, as a people, because all powers emanate from the people, it is us, the people, who delegate authority to the executive, to the judiciary, to the legislature. Us, the people, also have a right of saying there are certain clauses that we find, or there are certain issues we look at the way you are running this government need to be changed. That was the principle in which Punguza Mzigo initiative of a Third Way Alliance, so it was Kenya initiative of a Third Way Alliance, started. And they went around collecting signatures and doing everything. That was popular. Somebody came up and felt that this country of ours, there are certain issues happening that need to be resolved. And people did it. Had it passed the verification part, then it would have been very interesting to see how the executive, how the legislature, both in the national legislature and in the county legislative bodies, assemblies, were going to deal with it. But again, the popular initiative speaks to the challenge that leadership, elected leadership as is, can sometimes be selfish, can be able to create or can be puppets of the executive and create constitutional changes that favor the executive more than favors wananchi. That is why the popular initiative was created, as an avenue of expression. Remember, for us to change the constituency, the independence constitution, people died. There were riots. To have conversations about the need to remove Section 2A, the need to ingrain certain changes. There used to be a lot of riots because there was no avenue for ventilation. There was no avenue for people to organize themselves properly and create a constitutional moment as envisaged.
Well noted. Gentlemen, perhaps Magal, closing remarks as we anticipate the appeal process tomorrow.
I think this is an interesting exercise. All Kenyans who are civic-minded should pay attention. They should listen to the arguments. These are not academic arguments, as some would want us to think. They are not purely legal. After all, the Constitution is a political legal document, and we ought to be involved. We ought to listen to these arguments, basically, and form our own opinion. Should we have the referendum? Is the BBI a popular initiative? Should we have separate questions? Is the IEBC properly constituted to carry out a referendum? You know, these are all basic questions that are bound to occur again and again and again and again. And I think it is, it forms part of the civic education that the court spoke of.
Okay, well noted. Let's see how it plays out. Kyoko, your final take. Yeah.
On a different issue, outside the BBI and the impending legal drama that is about to engulf our country from tomorrow, is to congratulate the Kenyans who participated in the WRC. Those who were able to participate, the fans, everybody who was there, to congratulate the president and his government really for making sure that we have another 5 years of WRC happening. Maybe on a side note is that when we were growing up, Safari Rally used to go to Ukambani, it used to go to Kwale, it used to go to Kericho. So rather than it being a localized, the people of Nakuru and Naivasha have really gained for, and we are grateful. Yeah. We're taking nothing away from them. But as the organizers plan for next year, I would